Welcome to another episode of the Maryland Made Podcast. The Maryland Made Podcast provides timely, relevant, and practical information to empower student athletes to explore their potential and pursue their passions. What's up, everyone? I'm Sophia Baur-Waisbord, and most of y'all already know I'm the coordinator for program and curriculum design for the Maryland Made team. It's the last week of March. The cherry blossoms are blooming. We're getting some taste of warm weather. It's Aries season, and I'm excited to be here to have this conversation with two of my teammates, Resa and Sydnee, today. As most of y'all know, March is also Women's History Month, a month that means something in a variety of ways to each of us. We also want to give a shout out to the male champions on our team. Shout out TFB and Wally P. So this episode is for everyone, but especially the women out there. We hope our perspectives, experiences, and thoughts resonate with you all and give you something to think about, talk about, and take action. So to go ahead and kick off this conversation, I think it's important that we just start with, why is it important to have and celebrate Women's History Month, and why are we having a podcast episode dedicated to Women's History Month? Resa or Sydnee? The floor is open.
So I can jump in. It's Resa here, and in honor of this podcast, had to throw on the WNBA orange hoodie that everyone is familiar with. I think it's important for us to be having this conversation and even celebrating and acknowledging Women's History Month, because we're still not seen in a lot of places, right? It's more hurdles that we have to get through just to get and achieve what others are achieving. Even thinking about the fact that we're still having this conversation about equal pay in a lot of industries. So I think we continue to have to highlight the work, the influence that we have in this country and really abroad. And I think we have to continue to push the needle on this so that we can eventually one day, hopefully not 100 years from now, be at the same seats and being in the same spaces as some of our male counterparts. Sydnee, what about you?
I agree with everything that Resa said. I just honestly feel like this is important because we as women face so much on a day-to-day basis, and sometimes our accomplishments get kind of hidden. And so this is the month where, we all highlight each other, no matter your field, no matter your job position. And so agreeing with Resa said, honestly, we shouldn't just have a history month, although that it did start off as a week. We should just be all celebrated 365 days a year. So when that day comes, we will all be happy. But I really appreciate that we are even having this conversation about highlighting other women and each other.
I agree. And I think I'll add to that too. These are conversations that the three of us have with each other, probably with our friends in group texts, on Instagram DMs with our friends, those kinds of things. But I think it's important that these conversations get elevated to platforms where other people can hear these conversations, whereas other women who are like, yeah, these are things I'm thinking about too, or are, I'm seeing on my Twitter timeline, or I'm talking about with my friends. Or, for those who may not understand truly what women go through on a day-to-day basis, like an opportunity to really hear like our hearts and, our experiences, because oftentimes these are conversations that can be pretty, insular and like can be ones that aren't, shown too much. So I think it's really important that we're using this platform to, showcase this conversation to the public. So
Can I add this other piece? And the influence, right? Like, we work with young women every day. And I think they see their coaches as influencers to the work that they're doing in their specific field. But we also recognize that a lot of our students who we engage with every day may not stay in the sports field. And so how are we also giving them and putting them in places that they can see other women who are in power positions that they can achieve to be one day? So I think this podcast in particular also has the opportunity to influence some of the decisions that our students will make in their future.
And something that we'll dive into obviously later in our hot topic session will be representation matters. And I think that'll be a common theme that we'll be talking about today. So I think what you're talking about, Resa, is so important, is the representation does matter. So for the student athletes that we work with who do identify as women, who, watch us, work with us, those kinds of things, like it's important for them to hear, listen to our experiences too, to help them on their journeys. I definitely agree. Well, speaking of influences and influencers, would love each of you to share just if there's a woman that has influenced your life and how you navigate, your personal, your professional life journey, who's been instrumental to your development. Sydnee, we'll start with you.
Well, let's see. There have been a lot, I will say. So shout out to everyone who has been a part of my journey. Please don't feel a type of way if you did not get chosen. No, but really, so
Sydnee has a bracket for her women here.
I do. But I wouldn't have gotten where I am now, like without the support. Like you have to have that support system. And my journey started in spring 2019. And my first opportunity was with the Kansas City Urban Youth Academy, who is now a part of the MLB Royal Charities for our MLB team, the Kansas City Royals. And so I will say Angel McGee, she was my hiring manager, and going through like just that hiring process after, receiving your degree, you're kind of just trying to figure out like, where do I fit in? Where do I go? Do I want to stay home? Do I not want to stay home? And at that time, you're in the grind mode. You just want any opportunity in the field. And so I was never a big baseball person. I'm just going to say that, like, I wasn't. I would go to the Royals games for, the energy, the vibes. But that opportunity and that interview with her has shaped my life to today. And so even now, like, we are still close. I look up to her, and like she has shared her journey, which was more about you kind of got to start from the ground up to work your way up to where it is that you want to be. And so she currently does work for the Kansas City Royals. She's been with them for 9 years. She just had her 9-year anniversary. And so just from her being in my circle or my bracket, as Sophia would say, she's really just shapes me and who I am. And when you face different obstacles on your sports journey, just how to overcome, how you have to push through, how you have to just navigate, even when you're in that job position. So I'll say, like, I wasn't a baseball person. And so I was planning and executing events. And the day of, everyone knows how competitive people are at sporting events. And I will say, and I still laugh about this till this day, I was that one person that messed up the game clock during the tournament. And those parents were coming and looking at me, and they had their books like, ma'am, you missed out on one run. You missed out on. And so I'm like, okay. But I just knew, okay, a volunteer who was supposed to be there didn't show up. So I had to step up. And so realizing going through this journey, sometimes you just have to step up. You have to show up. You have to be your authentic self, even when you don't think, that's the position for you. You have to step up in your power and just show that I can do this. There are people on my bracket who know I can do this. And so just having that support system and having this connection of friendship and someone who believes and inspires me along my journey has just continued to help me grow.
I love that. That's awesome.
Listen, it's too early for the tears, man. I'm not ready for this yet. So I'll jump in. And it was interesting when this question was written in our document to think about, right? It's an easy question, easy answer for me. It's always going to be my mother, right? So I look at this woman who raised me and was leading an entire industry or organization in the federal government. One, you don't often see women in that power position, but the fact that she not only ran an entire sector of the government, she also did presidential transition. And so for those who don't know, that means getting one president out and one president in, right? And that's a huge undertaking while also leading an entire sector. And so for me, just watching how she navigated that space, how she handled herself, even when the fire was coming at her, and just like always remembering that it's never really about her. And yeah, they may be arguing at her, but her always standing in her truth, but also making sure that the people that she worked with, were also taken care of. And I think that y'all can be a testament to say I try to do the same thing for you all. But additionally, she's balancing a family, right? She has 2 kids we're 8 years apart. So that's a lot. And at the same time, helping me try to figure out who I am in this space, in this journey. I think we don't often think about all of the things that our mothers really do to make sure that their career is still going up, while also making sure that their household is cool. So for me, it will always be my mother. Additionally, just even thinking about how I can pick up the phone and call her now and say, so this is the issue I am trying to navigate. How do I handle this? And her to still just like be sharp about it. This woman retired at the moment she could. That's not happening these days, right? Like, not only did she have the age and the years of experience in the government, she was like, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
And I think about like, I won't have the opportunity because that's just not the way that the world works right now. But like, to just have the balls to say, nope, I'm done. You can call me if you want to, but I'm good. Like, that's powerful to me, right? When we continue to just see women in their 60s and their 70s continuing to work for whatever reason that is. And she just decided that her life was more important. And so I try to make sure that I'm adding those things in to my life now as I'm still working, but I'm looking forward to that day of retirement when I'm sitting here doing what she's doing and, you know, exercising every day and just kicking it. Like, that just seems like fun to me. So Sophia, I'll pass it to you. Who's influencing you?
Okay, well, I have to shout out my mama too. Moms are the best. I'm gonna kind of cheat on this question. I'm gonna give two. But my mom for sure, I definitely looked up to her as like a single mom, working professional who also worked in the government her whole life, always working to like improve the lives of those around her. But I think how she really influenced me too is she never said no. Like, I was like, I'm going to go to college very, very far away from home. And she was like, okay. And I was like, and I'm going to go to grad school really far away from home. And she was like, okay. And I was like, I'm going to take my first job really far away from home. And she was like, okay. And it was never because she like never was trying to hold me back to like keep me closer to home to spend more time with me, not because she didn't want that, but because she knew that like I needed to spread my own wings and like go explore the world on my own. And like that was so influential to my growth and my development. So shout out mom, she's the best. Also love that we get to work on the same college campus together. But I will also add someone who's been really instrumental to my professional growth specifically. Her name is Sarah Snyder. She currently works for the Baltimore Ravens as their director of performance. I'm gonna mess up her title now. Performance nutrition. She knows what her title is, and she knows how important she is to me. But anyways, I met her when I was working for the Michigan football team in undergrad, and she was my supervisor when I was an intern there. And then she went and worked the Detroit Lions, and then she went to the Ravens. And I've just really watched her grow as a working woman in the NFL, and just like in, for a professional league that doesn't totally have a ton of women representation all the time. She obviously, has just like really done a phenomenal job, like just showing her worth and her value, where like NFL teams are coming at, and recruiting her to join their teams. And I've just been so blessed to learn from her. And she's just shown me what it means to like just be loud about the things that you care about and stand up for the things that are important to you, and like walk into a room full of men and just like know that you are the expert in the room and you know what you're talking about. And like that has been so influential. Also, she's a redhead, so I feel like we share that too, which has been really special. So I very much think of her as like an older sister almost. And it's cool that she's in Baltimore, so she's close by. We get to spend a lot of time together, but it's just cool because we'll just hop on the phone for like hours and just talk about what it's like to be a woman working in sports, and different things that have helped her get to where she is and all these kinds of things. So I want to shout her out also. So I really appreciate us talking about that, because I think that's important to understand, those who have influenced us or helped us get to where we are today. So I want to move into our next segment, just focusing on hot topics, something we probably talk about with these people that we just mentioned, with each other. I know this comes up in our staff meetings, in our staff group texts, those kinds of things. So moving into hot topics, what are some current topics or issues that are occupying space in your mind, in your heart these days? There's a lot, so I'm sure that we'll have some good conversation about this. And it's really interesting that I feel like a lot of these hot topic issues have come up during the month of March, during March Madness, with women's basketball being as publicized and as watched as it is this month. And then also just with it being Women's History Month, a lot of these topics affecting women. So what are some of these issues right now?
I mean, what isn't an issue right now, right? Like, it's been interesting. So obviously we're recording this during our spring break, And I think this is a time when most of us are taking this down moment or trying to just like take a breath of fresh air, because we've been on the go since we started the spring semester, and we know that ending the spring semester it's going to be the same. And so even in this moment of where like you're trying to give reprieve and you're trying to stay off of social media, you can't help but want to be and gravitate towards it, because at least for me, there are two big things happening, right? We have the SCOTUS confirmation hearings of Judge Brown Jackson, and then we're still trying to figure out what's going on with Brittany Griner in Russia. So for me, watching these two Black women face these humongous challenges, and no one, and on one token, you got white men coming at this Black woman who is probably more qualified than all of them sitting there asking her these questions. And then on the other hand, you have a Black gay woman stuck in Russia who is at war right now, and no one wants to talk about it. It's mind-blowing to me that we're at this point, especially in the month of March. And so I'm a little frustrated because I need Brittany Griner to get back home and be safe, right? Who knows what's happening to her in the jail cells over in Russia. And I continue to think that if this were a white male athlete, that we'd be seeing different results, or we'd be talking about it more. And I know people continue to say, yeah, but they're in war and it's political and they don't want to bring spotlight to it. And I'm like, yeah, I don't want to hear that, right? And on the other hand, you know, I watched some of the hearings yesterday with Judge Brown Jackson, and it's hard to watch. It's hard to watch people demean her and try to, you know, dehumanize her. And I'm just sitting there looking at this powerful woman not go back at these men and this reserve that she is given. And I'm just like, how often do I have to walk into the office every day with like that body armor on that she is given right now to be in a space that she deserves to be in, right? It's really ridiculous that this is what our country has come to at this point, especially for Black women.
Mm-hmm. Sydnee, what about you?
So hot topics. Mine are going to be investing in women's sports and in the mental health in women's sports. So I'll start with investing in women's sports. For so many years, I think because I was an athlete, and I played basketball and volleyball.
Once an athlete, always an athlete, by the way.
There we go. Once an athlete, always an athlete. Look, let me get back on the court. Is Xfinity open? No. But yeah, so just realizing then, like in high school, there wasn't a lot of fans coming to like the volleyball games. And so usually there were football practice after the JV games, and then I played varsity. So that's when more people would start to show up. And so there were conversations about the JV players realizing like, well, we don't get any fans to come to our games, but varsity does. And so applying that to basketball, I was okay. I wasn't that good, but I was okay. But just realizing like how filled up the men's games were compared to the women's games. And so realizing now working in college athletics, it's the same thing. And I remember in undergrad doing a presentation about this. Why are there so many people interested in the NBA and not the WNBA? Why don't they get as much love? Why don't get the same, support or fan base? And so it's something that I'm realizing now, and that's in the media that's changing over time. And so just realizing like investing in women, we really, like Beyonce said, we really run the world and we are on the rise. So y'all need to hop on this train now, honestly. And that's what I feel like we are starting to do. They're starting to invest in women's sports. And it's important because it's showing how those that are, in grassroots growing up, there are more women that I have seen, especially like back home in Kansas City, that are exceeding and getting, scholarships for basketball, volleyball, tennis, softball, than when I was younger, because they are looking up to these college players, or they're looking up to the WNBA. And so the more that we can cross those barriers and open up those opportunities now, the easier it will be, for them. So I just honestly think the more that we invest in those women's sports, the more support they could possibly try to get. But I also feel like it's more of that fan base, because I honestly see it here. Attending certain games for the men and women's basketball team as well. Like, I was in shock. So this was my first time going to a D1 game. It was my first game. And I can't remember who the men were playing, but it was packed, in my opinion. And then I ended up going to a women's game, and it wasn't packed. And I was honestly in shock. I'm like, well, what's going on? What happened? Is everybody late? They didn't arrive? Like, what's going on? But then over time, I've just heard, like, from some guys that I've had conversations with, they would just say, oh, well, women's games are slower. Men's games are a little faster, or, we're just more interested in that. And so, those are kind of opinion based, but it just always made me curious as to why, we're not investing in women's sports, or why they don't have a big fan base. So Sophia and Resa, can you all speak on that? Have you all had conversations about that before?
So I'll add here really quickly. I think one thing, at least we've noticed this March that wasn't happening in previous Marches, is that the women's basketball tournament is now on regular TV. Mm-hmm. And, it used to be ESPN only, or you had to go on the website and watch the games, and now they're playing it on ABC, right? So to me, that's a start. And I think they ran the numbers over the first two rounds, and you notice there was a huge increase of viewership, right? And so when you put it on regular TV and it's sitting on a station that people have regular access to, yeah, you're going to get a bigger fan base. But additionally, like, especially looking at women's basketball in particular, in college, the field has now kind of evened out, right? Like, when I was growing up, it was Tennessee and UConn, and that was it. Mm-hmm. Now you got South Carolina, and you see Creighton beat Iowa, right? Like, there's more parity in the game, which makes it a better outcome, and more people want to gravitate towards it. So for me, like, that was one thing immediately that I at least noticed over this last weekend.
What I'll also add too, that just came to mind, like, connecting kind of both the things that both of y'all have just said, is like investing in women's sports at that college level is literally investing in their lives for like a long time, right? Because we're talking about the Brittany Griner piece, right? Like, that's investing in women's sports, because that's investing in a very, very prominent, talented female athlete, right? And like the fact that, like what Resa was saying, like, if it was a white male athlete, the media, the coverage around that might be very, very different than what it is right now, right? And that all goes back to still investing in women's sports, and something I think we'll talk about a little bit later, talking about, equal pay for, women's soccer team and that kind of stuff too. So, I mean, yeah. So I definitely think this March has just shown us, a lot different than it was last year, and people, got loud about the things that they cared about and demanded things be changed. And I think we saw that, with softball, with the College Softball World Series too. And so it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out this summer too. So I think one thing that also, kind of going back to what you were talking about, Resa, with the SCOTUS hearings, that has really been occupying my mind too, is all the photos of Judge Brown Jackson, and then you see like her daughter, like kind of behind her, like watching, and just like how powerful that is. Because like, I think, Resa talked about your relationship with your mom, I talked about my relationship with my mom, like how powerful that relationship is. And like, I think, hopefully one day I'm blessed to be a mom, and like be able to set like that example for, my daughter. But like, just thinking about like that relationship and that experience that they get to share right now, and like, but also thinking about how hard it is for her daughter to sit there and watch like these men white men speak to her the way that they have been, and like asking her absurd questions that have literally nothing to do with her job. And what's also interesting, and sometimes it's the women up there too who are asking these questions of her, right? And like you have some politicians, white women from certain states, who are asking questions that have nothing to do with what's happening, right? And so I think as we talk about Women's History Month, it's like really important that this month is intersectional, because I think oftentimes like this month can be exclusive to certain, sometimes white women celebrate this month and forget to include a bunch of other identities and a bunch of other women like in this month. And I think like oftentimes like we see women doing a lot of harm to other women in these spaces, right? And so to think that at these hearings for the Supreme Court justice, that's another woman attacking a woman at that stand is just like, is something that is like really, really heavy. And to also have her daughter sitting there and watching that happen, that's really hard. So yeah, heavy topics, hot topics. What else do people have kind of occupying their minds and hearts right now?
Sydnee, I think you were going to talk about the mental health piece. So what are you going to talk about with that?
Oh yeah.
Right. So mental health. I'll say like the last few years, especially with COVID, mental health has been really important, not only to me, but athletes as well. For instance, like Simone Biles, when she kind of stepped away in Tokyo because of her mental health and as much, pressure she had on her from, everyone else. I honestly feel like I felt that at a point in time when I was an athlete in high school. You just have a lot of pressure. So, for instance, somehow, always, I don't know how this happened, but in the rotation at volleyball games, I always was the last one to end us off serving. And a lot of times we would win, and then sometimes we would lose. It's okay. We was average. And it was just, it was a lot of pressure. And so a lot of athletes feel like that. Your performance level, they're supposed to show up, they're supposed to perform that's their best of their ability in their sport. And I think sometimes as fans, we don't see everything that they share. We don't see everything that they're going through, what it takes for them to show up as their authentic self, as their best self, with the training. And then especially focus on like college athletes, going to class, practices, training, still having time for their self, connecting with family, with friends. Like, that's a lot. That is a lot. And so I think realizing how us as women can just shine on other people, be that support system to say like, hey, I'm here if you need something. You need to take a break. You need to, not overwhelm yourself. We know you're an athlete. We know you're trying to, just not even being an athlete, like you're trying to succeed, you're trying to move up. You need to take time away because you can't show up as your authentic self when your mental is not there. And so I think sometimes that got overshadowed before like COVID kind of hit us all in the world. Like we were all just used to being on the go, trying to be our best selves. I got to get this and I got to get that done, which is all good, but is it going to be your best work? Yeah, you got it done, but is it the best that it could be because you weren't in that mental state that you needed to be in? So yeah, any extra thoughts about mental health, Sophia and Resa?
Listen, we could have a whole hour just on mental health alone, right? But I think we also live in now a society where social media is the number one thing that is the number one way people get an image of someone. And so for so many people, they use social media as showing the perfect side of their life. And so I think about how many of the people around us, the students we work with, whoever, are looking at this perfect life that people are putting out on social media and saying like, I also have to be that perfect. Not realizing that like, we're only showing you what we want you to see and not really showing you everything that's going on in someone's life. And so I think we really need to be in a space to like understand that that's the only one side, maybe 10% of a person's story that you're seeing, and you don't understand all the other trials and tribulations they may be facing. Additionally, I think we have to really think about how do we share the story of those of us who are in therapy, right? Like, I think that is something that, you know, helps continue to break the stigma and helps allow people to like go talk to a non-biased party about what you're going through, that can help and give you skills and tools to cope with whatever you're going through, because nobody has a perfect life. And I think we have to start to really remember that nobody's life is going to be perfect. There's always going to be a hurdle that you have to jump or go through, really just as you continue to live. And so I think that's something that I sit with right now. Sophia, what about you?
Yeah, and I think a lot about, there was like so many graphics that have been circulating around social media around this topic too, that's like, you know, check on your strong friends, or don't forget to check on your strong friends, those kinds of things. And I always like, I take that a little, I think that needs to be reframed a little bit, because I think it's, people see that and they're like, okay, cool, let me just text my friend and be like, are you okay? And like, that is like a question that I don't think really is helpful to a lot of people, right? And so something that I actually have practiced a lot, and one of my friends from grad school taught me this, was like, how can I support you? Asking that question. Or, you know, think being more intentional in the ways that we're like asking questions, like check in with our friends and like be there for the people that we work with, that are our friends, or the athletes that we work with. You know, like, what are you, like, how can I support you? How can I be here with you through this? I think instead of just being like, are you okay? Or, you know, how are you doing? Because I think sometimes those are really overwhelming and hard questions for people to answer. And those who, you know, do want to, you know, show, as you were saying, Resa, like show that they're strong or living this certain life, like that's not a question they maybe are really gonna be able to answer very honestly, or feel, you know, totally empowered or safe to answer that question. I think this is like a perfect segue also into the next segment for us, that's really going to align with the 3 pillars that we focus on as the Maryland Made team. So the first one being leadership. So I feel like in discussing all these hot topics, we've talked about certain women leaders that have really taken on a lot of these issues and really championed them, or been, you know, primary advocates and activists in these different capacities. So want to pivot us into talking about our first pillar that we talk about as a Maryland Made staff, leadership. So first question, and I think both of you kind of touched on this when we talked about hot topics, but how important is it to you to see women lead the way in activism, whether it's sports, community organizing, politics, etc.?
I mean, I think it's huge, right? And I think about, it's interesting to sit and think about even my career within college athletics. I've only, in my full-time roles, have only ever had a female boss. Never thought about that until we decided to have this conversation. But to recognize that even though you may have a female boss, doesn't mean that they're always pushing the needle and creating seats at the table for the next women behind them. And so I think about watching even just like how the WNBA last year in the Wubble, you know, they started, well, this, I mean, happened prior to the Wubble, but, you know, they were having conversations about what was actually happening in their neighborhoods and really trying to be on the front lines of these conversations. And so I think about, how are we doing that within our own workplace, right? Just because we work in a different space doesn't mean that these issues aren't prevalent and we're not, and that people aren't having conversations about it. And so I think for me, I've always been centered in trying to bring who I am to the office, because oftentimes I am the only Black gay woman, right? And so there's a lot of identities that I'm holding, and rightfully so, know that there are students who identify in the same way. And so I remember distinctively when I lived in Oregon, always having to have the conversation sometimes with my white female counterparts to say, like, y'all, this is what's happening in the news today. There are students that are going to be affected. Like, I need y'all to be paying attention. I need you to be on the front lines, because I can't be the only one that carries that. And so it isn't really until you put it in somebody's face that they're like, wow, okay, yeah, maybe I need to understand the history of some of these issues. So for me, I watch what other women who have a powerful platform are doing, and I try to replicate that in the spaces that I occupy, because we're all struggling, we're all going through it. And I think we saw in the summer of 2022 that everybody made these statements of like, we're going to hire DEI people, or we're going to do X, Y, and Z. And like now people are saying, okay, that was 2 years ago. What have you done to move the needle? Because we are still having these same struggles, and your people that are in your organization are being affected every day. So for me, I like to watch and then replicate, put my own spin on it. But I think it's important for us to continue to think about how women typically are, Black women are typically the ones on the front lines of a lot of these issues.
Mm-hmm. I think I'll add to that too. Like, I think oftentimes when we talk about this question of activism, we think of celebrities or those who have like big platforms. But I think what you're talking about, Resa, is so important to think about, like those in our everyday life who are activists, right? Who are like actively going in each day and, you know, showing up as themselves, which is a form of activism, right? And so I think about that with you, like how lucky we are to have you as like our leader on our team who like encourages us to like be our true authentic selves. And then I also found someone that's very important to me, Dr. Lacey Carmen Johnson, who I think also is a huge activist and talking about like, you know, negotiating for your worth and like, how are you, you know, that goes beyond salary. Like, how are you finding the right environments that really support you and are healthy for you? And how can you negotiate for something that is like the best option for you, and using that, you like just learning from her and like watching her teach so many other people and how she constantly invests in other younger people coming through this industry is just like so admirable to me. And like that's activism to me too, right? And like that's something that, like you're saying, like I look to replicate in like the work that I do, and hope that the students that we work with like feel that way, that they have the ability to do that too once they get you know, once they graduate. I think another point that leads me to, and Resa, you touched on this. So Sydnee, I'd be curious to hear your experiences, but like in the environments that you occupy, is female leadership something you see? Because I know for me, I've also only ever had women supervisors. I've never been supervised by a man either. So when that day comes, that will be very interesting.
So I will say that female leadership does show up. I mean, Resa is my boss. But as I mentioned earlier in this podcast, Angel McGee, she did hire me, but she was not my boss. But when I worked there were other women. So I saw like, oh, okay, this is like, these are individuals who I can learn from. Not being as familiar with, you know, the MLB and the Royals organization, but they did kind of pave the way and help me understand different concepts with the planning for those baseball, softball events, which kind of shaped on why I'm interested in wanting to plan and execute events. But also being a part of women leaders in college sports, I have been able to be connected with so many women just across the board in different avenues, different positions, different age groups, and just seeing that and realizing through listening to different podcasts or going to the convention, or just having impromptu conversations with them, just realizing that we all do as women go through similar situations, and just seeing how they are able to navigate and always try to show up themselves as a leader, just kind of motivates me that I am a leader myself. This is how I can navigate certain situations, and just kind of move up the ladder, and then just be able to, you know, take note of those gems to help those, you know, behind me.
I like seeing that you are actually pivoting us to our next point about community with other women. So think about our next pillar as career. So talking about, you know, in your professional life, how is finding community, you talked about this a little bit, Sydnee, but how has finding community with other women been important and vital, or not, to your overall well-being, professional success, growth, development? And you don't have to answer Sydnee first. Resa, you can go too.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting, right? Like I remember having, like in my undergrad years, a Black female mentor who was like, yeah, you'll work in this space, it's gonna be great, you know, and that kind of continued, right? But then I've also had some people in this industry who don't necessarily like that I show up as my authentic self, right? Like being a gay Black woman in this industry is still a taboo thing that we don't want to talk about. And because we make it uncomfortable for gay people to be in this industry, let's continue to look at the bills that are popping up in all of these states, right? And so for me, I am very protective about who I consider in my inner circle, because if you don't like that I'm going to show up as how I do, then that's a personal problem to you and only to you, because I'm going to continue to show up and I'm going to continue to break down these barriers and these walls that people want to have up because I'm not a natural woman, whatever that may mean to some folks, right? So for me, it did start with some mentors that are still in this field to this day. It started with some folks within the Women Leaders Organization and being a part of that. But now it's really just like looking at who I can give back to, right? Who are the people that honestly I'm putting on my team here in Maryland? Who are the people that are picking up and calling me for my side business, right? And asking me to come do work with them. I'm very intentional about who I want to have conversations with and who I want to do the work with. Because if you're not really, truly ready to move the needle, then there's no space for you right now in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I see you shaking your head, Sydnee. What you got?
Mic drop is what I was thinking. You basically covered it all. Let's see. So I did kind of speak on like community. I'll say first, like within my family. So like, I feel like I've always had that good support system, that community there within women. So from my sisters, my mom and my aunts and cousins, like I've always had that community, but just realizing that support system is going to always be there. They may not always get and understand that dream or that goal that I'm trying to reach. So then I realized there has to be a way for me to be around those who are interested in sport and make those connections. And so I started going to networking events. And so that's how I kind of met my mentor, Bree Vaughn, who some of you may know, some of you may not. Look her up if you don't. No, but so I kind of stepped out of my comfort zone and I asked her to be my mentor. And she's kind of really just helped me also shape into who I am today. But she just really made me realize that you have to have a group of women that will be there to uplift you. You may not always like what they say, but you need those individuals around you, because I will say Ayanna Tweedy, some of you may know her as well, like having these people that are impactful that can help you along your journey and just see things in yourself that you don't even see, and just push you forward, wants you to keep going, and then wants you to also want to be a mentor you know, in a few years. But just realizing that in order for you to grow, you have to have those people that not only support you, not only inspire you, but also have connections and who understand not even your full journey, but somewhere of like where you're going. Like, I've been here, I don't want you to make the same mistakes. This is how you should possibly navigate it. This is, you know, and share the journey of themselves and just show that, hey, I did it, you can do it. We have different paths. You gonna get there. I can help you get there, but it really kind of starts with you. So it starts with I'm trying to remember. Yaya, woman leader, said, "You are who you are who you surround yourself with." Mm-hmm. And so that's really about the community. You are who you really surround yourself with, because people rub off of you. Your energy rubs off. What you do in your daily life rubs off of not only you, but those around you. So having that positive energy and that motivation and that drive just wants you to continue to push forward and succeed at your best ability.
Mm-hmm. So before Sophia jumps in, you just said something that I literally was having a conversation with somebody last week. And it was about just like even where I'm at in my journey and this person being in a position above me and a few years on me, right? And I'm telling her about, you know, the fact that I'm in a long-term relationship, that we did just buy a house, that there is potential of future wonderful things, right? And she was like, you have me now thinking about how I wish I was doing what you're doing back then, right? Like having a child at her age may not be something that she can do. And so I even think about how we see women in our industry. Sometimes they aren't married, sometimes they don't have kids. And so really hoping that y'all can see what's happening and think about how do you lift your family before the job sometimes. I don't think that we often talk about that as women. But Sophia, I'll let you chime in terms of the community. We know you have a large community surrounding you.
Well, I really appreciate you bringing that up, because that's something that I have thought a lot about entering in this industry, is like, balancing the family and career. I saw my mom do that, for my whole life. And so I think having examples of women who do that in this industry, but also women who talk about it, I think is just so important. But yeah, to the community piece, I mean, for me, like this whole notion of like women's leadership, women's community, like, I mean, I was on sports teams like growing up, so definitely had that. But I think also when I was in college, y'all know this, but for those who don't, like I was in a Panhellenic sorority. So I had 150 women that I spent a lot of time with, lived in a sorority house of 60 other women. And so like that was really like a community for me of women who, that's really where I feel like I found, who I wanted to be and like where I was going, and like people who believed in me in times I didn't believe in myself. Like there are many times I thought about transferring from the University of Michigan, and the people who convinced me to stay, which was the best decision I could have made, were the people who were in my sorority. And ultimately that turned into a job for me. I got to serve as a consultant for my national sororities organization and travel around the country and visit over 50 different college campuses and work with a bunch of different women on different college campuses, and just help them also have that same opportunity to realize their potential and what they can truly be, and see more in themselves than they have ever imagined to see in themselves. So I think that was really where that notion of community really started for me. But I think, like y'all mentioned, women leaders, like that's been like a huge network for me. Like I've gotten a really great mentor. Shout out Emily Howard at Boston University through that. She helped me get my first job out of grad school. So having that network, like Sydnee, you were talking about, like that network for the career piece. I have these two other friends that I met through women leaders. We have standing weekly calls on our calendars on Monday nights that Resa can see when she tries to schedule things, and like we check in with each other and hold each other accountable. And honestly, our group message is called "When One of Us Wins, We All Win," because like that is something that we
the truth.
Yeah, that we hold that so true to ourselves, right? It's like when one of us gets a job, it feels like all three of us got a job, right? When one of us gets a raise, it feels like all three of us got a raise, And so I just think like that notion of community is so important. And maybe Sydnee, I think you were talking about this with your family, like kind of understanding your dream, but I think it's also important to have community outside of this industry too. So people who don't always see the day-to-day of this job and the day-to-day of this work, who are also part of that community and are supportive to you. So I'm a big advocate for community, and y'all know I love people. So like, to me, like this is like my favorite thing. But on the notion of pay, I do want to talk about this topic in the career. Let's talk about the movement about women getting paid equally. So women still make less than white men in this country, and we've seen the USWNT get their equal pay after years of fighting. What does this change mean to you, and how can you be an advocate for change in this area?
I'm just going to start by saying, so y'all can get y'all thoughts together, that it shouldn't have taken that long of a fight for them to get this equal pay. Just when you even put up their accomplishments compared to the men's team, because, everybody likes to compare apples and oranges, literally in that sense, and they still weren't getting the money. It's mind-blowing that we're still having to have these conversations, that we're still having to fight for what people are worth, right? And it goes beyond them in a lot of ways too, right? How many of us have had to negotiate our worth and still feel like we haven't gotten what we deserve? This is a huge conversation I feel like I always want to talk about. So I'm gonna be quiet now and let y'all talk. But again, this could be a whole hour episode in my eyes.
The thing that I'll add to this equal pay is this, like the piece of like, how can you be an advocate for change in this arena? to me, it's like, I am so adamant and loud about helping my friends with their offer, like when they're accepting offers, but like, as Lacey taught me, do not accept your first offer. And so I have been like very vocal with a lot of my women friends, like, when you get that offer, you better tell me when you get that offer, and we're going to come up with like a counter offer. And like, I feel very, very vocal about that because, or not very vocal, I feel very strongly about that because that is how we're going to keep getting closer and closer and closer to closing that gap, right? Is like, don't, like, women, do not accept the first offer you're getting. Like, if you don't have a friend who can help you with it, like, come to me, like, I will help you, like, negotiate, because I think that that is just so important, because we know, one, men are negotiating, and we know, two, men are applying for jobs that they're not qualified for, and they're getting them. And we know, three, that men are getting offers that are way higher than what women are getting. And women are like, I feel bad asking for more, or like, I don't know, I'm not totally qualified.
They don't feel bad when they see the comparison though.
Right.
That's when you get mad. Like, let's stop you getting mad, and like, let's look at the hard facts.
Exactly. So I feel like the way that I've really been advocating for change in this is like within my own friend circles, within my own friends, is like really helping them when they're getting new jobs or getting promotions or getting raises, like preparing them for those conversations. Like, let's practice, like, let's legit have the conversation. I will be your supervisor, right? And like, I just feel so strongly about that.
What you got, Sydnee?
I will say, you got to advocate. You got to stand in your power, and you need to make sure that you are getting paid your worth. I just honestly feel like, from different conversations that I've had with different individuals, that us as women, we kind of settle for less. Like, men have that, I don't know, they have that mindset, that drive that's like, oh, or like that attitude, that persona that's like, oh, okay, yeah, this is how much, that salary amount is. I'm gonna just, go ahead, I'm gonna apply. But then, like, us as women, we were like, looking at the job description, I don't know if I qualify. Like, we disqualify ourselves before we qualify ourselves for that job offer, like Sophia was talking about. And then we try to go after that first offer, and then it's like we go right after it. Like, we don't think about it. We don't weigh out our worth. We don't say, like, is this even worth, me accepting? Where guys or men, they make sure that they get their worth. And so I would say, I don't think at this moment I advocate as much as I should, but I live strongly by getting paid your worth and making sure that your worth equates to the amount of work that you're doing, the amount that you're putting in, the amount of time and dedication. And agreeing with Resa, it should not have taken this long. It should not have taken this long. But kind of going back to what I mentioned earlier, women are on the rise. We are coming after everything we want. And in the next couple of years, equal pay needs to be up. It needs to be up.
So I'll add one thing, and I heard this the other day, and I don't know what I was listening to when they said it, but if a woman, typically women want to be able to check every box next to the job description. If you're applying for a job that you can check every box, then that's not a job you need. Because that means you're already overqualified for that job. So why are we waiting until we can check every box, right? You have to have some moments of growth in the position. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to be retained long, etc. Right? But Sydnee, you just said something about men having a mindset of they just deserve more. And I don't know that that's a mindset that they have, more than that's how our country shows it. Right? So we have a country, and I mean, you can say abroad too, but I only live in the US. We have a country that always puts men ahead of women. And so they're always going to be looked at saying, okay, well, you can come in at a certain range just because of how you identify. So I wouldn't necessarily say it's a mindset. I just would say that that's how our country has ruled for so long. And so now we're having women who are in power positions saying, like, nope, this isn't how it's going to be anymore.
And our society protects men, but does not protect women in the same way. Yes. Well, and I think, this has all been an overarching conversation about identity, which is our third pillar for Maryland Made. So want to move into our segment of identity. And Resa, you touched on this, and you obviously set an amazing example for all of us on the Maryland Made staff about this. But I want to talk about how we show up in our professional lives authentically or not. And you can relate that to some of the stereotypes that you've maybe experienced related to this in the workplace. So want to have a brief discussion about that too.
Yeah, I mean, I'll make this quite easy for a lot of people. I'm going to show up how I'm going to show up, right? I remember podcast 8 years ago now, I was up for an interview at a school in the South, and I will not state what school it was, but I had a person say to me, like, how you show up isn't going to work here. And that's because how I show up is in a male suit. And at that point, yes, I had long hair. For those who just met me, I now have short hair, right? And so in my head, I was like, well, what does that mean? Like, because I wear men's clothes, like, and I'm a woman, y'all can't put 2 and 2 together. Like, help me understand this. And luckily I had a person who I knew who worked at the institution for us to have a, very closed door conversation, I'd like to say. And so at that moment, I was like, okay, it's all off at this point. Like, I'm just going to be the most flamboyant, authentic person I can be. And yeah, that means every time you see me in a professional setting, I'm going to have on a men's suit. I'm going to have on a tie. I'm going to have a cleanest haircut in the room because that's who I am. But on a day-to-day basis, I don't need to be in a suit, right? And I think athletics is so interesting in the industry we work in that people feel like they have to show up in suits every day. For what? Like, we work in an atmosphere that is around sports, and they don't play in suits and ties, right? They play in athletic gear. So I'm going to show up some days in sweatpants and a hoodie because I may be sitting in front of my computer for 8 hours of that day. So it's more productive for me to be in comfortable clothing than to be in a suit sometimes. So I think, for me, in that essence, that's just how I'm going to show up. I also have had people say, don't cut your hair because that's the last feminine thing you have on you. Not really true, because I am still a woman and hair should not mean that much. But like, I'm going to rock the haircut. And so I love to see these younger, and I'll call them kids because it's starting in the high schools and in the middle schools, like just being whoever they are. And I think we have to embrace that, because these are going to be the people that someday will be my boss, right? And I'll be like, yes, clapping my hands, like, yes, you come in here with your tattoos, you come in here with your locks or whatever you got, because at the end of the day, how I show up should not mean that my work isn't getting done. My work always going to get done, and I'm going to show up how I'm going to show up. And you just have to accept that. And if you don't, that's not an environment I want to be in. Mm-hmm. And I tell people that all the time. If they want you to, for men, if they want you to take out your earrings because that's against a policy, like, that ain't an environment you want to be in, because you can't show up as who you are every day.
Sydnee, what you got?
Be quiet.
Whew. Stereotypes. I'll just say, I won't say the organization I work for. I will just say, at the time, I was the only African-American there. And coming to work, we were in business casual, but they had a different type of business casual. So it was more of, you gotta have flats, you gotta have heels, you gotta dress to the par, because you just never know who's gonna walk through the door. And so I felt like there was a lot of pressure at that job every time I was preparing for work. I'm like, because I was coming out of undergrad, and so it was like, oh, I gotta do this, I gotta look this way, I gotta look that way. And so I will say that is one thing I do love about working here, and that my boss allows us to do. We get to show up as our authentic self. So as you see today, I have on the t-shirt and I have on a cute cardigan. Some jobs that's not allowed. Resa has on the hoodie. If I wanted to come to work and I want to wear a hoodie, I can wear a hoodie. So being able to have that flexibility, and my boss know that I can still show up and I can still get my work done. I'm happy. But at that job, it was pressure. So I'm thinking, okay, yeah, my feet kind of hurt because I've been walking around in these heels. Let me sit down for a little bit and, you know, take the weight off of my feet. But that's what was going in my mind as I'm still trying to do my work. So I don't think people understand that I was uncomfortable, but I had to kind of get used to the uncomfortableness while still trying to get my job done. And I don't think most people really talk about that. But I will say that over time, it has seemed that business casual or how you get to show up at work has changed over the years. But also more stereotypes. As you can see, my hair is in a bun today. And if I come into the office on Monday, I might have some braids. And then on Tuesday, it might be a twist out. Friday, it might be an afro. My boss doesn't care how my hair looks because why? I still show up. However, at different institutions or in a different field, that could be an issue. And so that's happened for years. And I will say, I actually did do this. So we took headshots, I think it was earlier this year, and I had braids. And so I finally felt confident in myself to take a headshot picture with braids. And for years, it's always been, oh, as an African-American woman, if your hair is not straight in a professional headshot, you never felt like it was okay, or you always feel like it had to be a certain angle. So knowing, oh, I can go and be my authentic self and take a headshot with braids, that was the most relief and weight off my shoulders I have ever felt. And I will say, like, looking at LinkedIn when people post their headshots, there are a lot of women like expressing that and talking about that. Like, that is a big change for us as women. Like, we've never been able to have that sense of relief of being able to take a photo that's probably just gonna be on somebody's website that you're gonna connect to us with, to just have a conversation, for us to, you know, do our job depending on the job duty. But us being able to just show up as our authentic self and not feel that pressure of, oh, I gotta book a hair appointment because I gotta have my hair straight, or I gotta figure out if I'm gonna have enough time to wash, blow dry, deep condition my hair for picture day tomorrow, just for my picture to go on the headshot. And I feel like all other races don't get that much pressure, or, you know, have to deal with that stereotype. But it's taken so many years for us to get to where we are now, for us to be able to show up as our authentic self and realize our hair does not always have to be straight for us to show up and do our job, and for us to look professionally.
Yeah, she just said a whole word.
Right. And the other thing I'll add to that too, it's actually related to when I interviewed at Maryland. I had just gotten my nails done, like right before my interview, like a week before, and my favorite Peloton instructor had posted this manicure that she got, and it was like half the nail was teal, then the next nail, half of it was red, the next half was yellow, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I'm gonna get these done. Got them done. And I was like, oh, I have an interview at Maryland. And I was like, I had these long, like, acrylic nails with all these bright colors on them. And I was like, you know what? I spent a lot of money on these. I'm not going to change them. I'm going to go to my interview at Maryland. And if Resa doesn't want to hire me because of my nails, that's okay. But I also, because what I knew about Resa, I was like, that's not going to be an issue. And
I didn't look at your nails not one time. Not one time. Nope.
And so I went to my interview with my nails, and what I will remember is Katie Dustin, I know you're listening to this podcast episode, is at the end of my interview with the students, Katie said, Sophia, I really like your nails. Where did you get them done? And I was like, that is all I needed. That is all I needed, because one, I was able to, like you were saying, Sydnee, just do my job and talk about how I was qualified to do this job, but then also honestly made a connection with a student because of the nails that I had too, because I think like that's something that the students that we work with, like, they need to see us as our authentic selves too, so that they know that that's okay, whether that's how they're showing up in the classroom, on the field, on the court, you know, when they're applying for internships, applying for jobs. And like, I think that's so important. And the other thing that I will also add about this identity piece related to like dress code in the workplace and whatever, in a previous job that I had, I one time was told, and y'all know how I come to work, I wear like crazy prints and loud colors and, you know, whatever. And I was told that I couldn't wear what I was wearing anymore because it's too distracting to the men that I work with. And I was
that sounds like a them problem and not a you problem.
Right. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. Thank you very much for letting me know. And did not change how I dressed, but it definitely changed how I thought of that place that I worked at. And so it's like you were saying, Resa, like if there are places that aren't going to accept you for who you are, then like it's just not the place for you. And that's something that I think, like you're saying, Sydnee, like takes a lot of courage to, you know, have over time, like especially when you're early on in your career, you might not feel like you have the courage to, you know, really stand in that truth. But like, one, as we talked about community, there'll be a community of people who stand behind you and whatever that decision is that you need to make. And then two, a community of people behind you who will tell you that you're making the right decision or you're making the right call, and encourage you to be like that brave and courageous to, you know, do those things.
Absolutely.
So want to transition us to our last segment here, just thinking about what's next. So we've had some really good conversations here about things that we've experienced, things that we're watching going on in the world, things that, you know, come up in the workplace for us. But really just what's next for y'all in these topics? What are some changes that you want to see? What are some things that you wish that you knew earlier in your career? Let's start there.
I mean, I think for me, this is continue to have conversations out loud, right? So when I say out loud, that could be on any of your social media platforms. That's a form of out loud that you can be doing. Also having these conversations in your staff meetings, having these conversations in spaces that other people occupy that maybe don't want to be in the conversation, but need to be in the conversation. I think we need to get away from having closed door conversations, or you had a thought at a meeting and now you're going to go talk to that person one-on-one instead of saying, hey, I agree in the meeting, right? I think we need to just continue to have these things out loud. The other thing I'll say is like, you know, changes I want to continue to see is people standing with marginalized communities, right? And when I say that, like we have a serious problem of like these macro and microaggressions that are happening day in and day out in the workplace. And like, I need for specifically our white counterparts to like put that shit to an end, right? Like it is time for y'all to step in and stand with us to say like, this shouldn't be. Otherwise, we're going to continue to see Black individuals, and I'll speak to Black people because that's who I am, continue to pivot to this remote work. Well, we know we don't have to show up and deal with all that other stuff besides just trying to do our job. So like those are like on the forefront of my mind, I feel like every day. What about you?
Me?
That was you, Sophia.
Oh, I was like, which you, me or Sydnee? I think for me, like you said, yeah, being loud about these conversations. And I think for me, it's having these with the athletes that we work with, right? I think it's super important to be transparent about what the world looks like, you know, out there post-college, because I do think college can create, and we probably all experience in our own ways, college can create this bubble for you. You know, and it's really easy to, you know, find the groups or the communities that you feel the most comfortable with, and then you get out into the world. And I think we have such a unique and special opportunity to work with students, right, and be part of their growth and development and journey. And I think for me, it's being transparent, having these conversations with them. And I think we do, you know, we as a team really value that. And I think just encouraging those conversations with them. I think also thinking to the question of like, what do I wish that I knew earlier in my career? I think Judge Jackson said this really well yesterday, persevere, right? Like there's always going to be, like there are people who are counting on you to, you know, do what you were created and made to do, and like persevere through that, right? Because what you have is so special and so unique, each of us. And so I think I wish that I like knew that earlier, that is like the motivation or like the words of wisdom that I needed to continue going on.
That's powerful. What you guys said?
Another mic drop. So I will say changes that I want to see. I want us to continue to try to move forward, like as a whole, like the world for women in general, because I just think it gives women in general on different levels, from the elementary, middle, high school, college, all of us in like our professional careers and still wanting to move up. Just that opportunity of like what we can look forward to, what is going to continue to change. As Resa mentioned earlier about the performance on television with the women's basketball, and kids have different role models. Oh, I want to do this, I want to do that. I will say, I talked about basketball, so I wanted to go to UConn because my favorite player at the time was Maya Moore. So me, for instance, hey, keep your opinions. No, but just saying, like, those are all role models. And so kind of pivoting on what Sophia said, on like that change and like working with the student athletes that we do work with every day, giving them that space and helping them realize that community that you do have now, how to utilize that, because I don't think we understand how impactful that community is and how quick it will change once you walk across that stage and get your degree, and you're in that start experiencing that adult life and that personal journey.
So Sydnee, then I'm going to toss it over to you. What do you do for self-care when working in, all the things that you've shared today, all the things that you've learned from, have challenged you? What do you do for self-care?
I actually do a lot.
So why do you say that as if we would be surprised to hear that?
Right.
No, I actually do a lot. So I'll first start with in the office. So if I do know I have a lot of
Resa's face right now.
I'm waiting to hear this answer. So go ahead. The floor is yours.
If I do know I have a lot of meetings, I will come in here. I won't touch my phone. I won't do anything. I'll just sit because my mind is processing. It's literally just processing everything from all those meetings. I will debrief. So like Resa and Sophia know, I have colorful sticky notes. And so sometimes I will be debriefing from all of these meetings, because not only do I have a notepad, not only am I typing up notes, but I'm also writing down on these sticky notes. So that's a way that I self-care here. Sometimes you may walk past my door and the light might be off because this light in here is a little bright, and it calms me. It calms my mind. I use the Calm app. So sometimes I have a meditation that's going on in here, or sometimes I'll just play some soulful music just to calm my mind as well. So that's what I do here in the workplace. Sometimes I listen to podcasts. It just depends on the day. But I'll say, like, outside of work, I've learned to be more in tune with myself, just with not even reading the whole book, but reading different parts of books, reading different scriptures as well. And then working out, whether it's just doing mini stretches or going for a walk, listening to some music. And then I like talking on the phone. So
that's not surprising.
If you all don't know,
likes to talk.
I am a little far from home. So sometimes I do get homesick. And so just talking to family members is part of my self-care as well. And like Sophia mentioned, we can show up as our authentic self. So sometimes I do go and get that mani-pedi because it is needed. And when you're sitting in that chair and they got that back massage, you got to go get you one because it's needed. But those are different ways that I practice self-care in the workplace and on my own time, which help me show up as my authentic self every day.
Oh,
So what
self-care.
about you?
You know, for me, it's interesting because I don't know that I truly did self-care or thought about self-care in the way that I think we talk about it now. And it's interesting that you're asking this question because last week my therapist asked me, well, what do you do for yourself? And I was like, girl, what you mean? Like, I got other things to take care of. Me is not always on the list. And so when I sat back and thought about that question, like going to get a haircut for me is self-care. Because one, just love the foolishness in the barbershop that I go to because they don't know how to contain some of their conversations. But I just, that space and just knowing that at the end of it, it'll be a beautiful product like this for those who are watching us. But then something else recently that I did this week was I went and got a 90-minute hot stone massage, and let me tell you, life-changing. No, I've only done massages a couple of times, but this one was great because my mind, like I just zoned out for 90 minutes. Like, how often do we get to put our phone down, take off our Apple Watch, and not have something near you buzzing or talking at you? So it was really nice to just be able to do that. And then for me, my last piece is probably just spending time with my partner, because y'all know our 6'1" man of the team. You know, we like to rock it. We like to kick it. We like to just sometimes sit here and watch mindless TV and do nothing, right? Like those are my moments for me that are self-care. Sophia, wrap us up here. What do you do for self-care besides talk to everybody as well?
We do love Nat. Nat really is the 6'1" man. Self-care for me, I'll keep it quick. Peloton. I'm a big Peloton fan. So if you also are listening to this and a Peloton person, let's do a class together. Cody Rigsby, Jess Sims, Alex Toussaint are the loves of my life. Other things, my friends, like talking to my friends, hanging out with my friends, like social community, that is it for me. And I think just learning what I've learned recently to do, just spending also more time by myself. So I'm a big fan of spending a lot of time with people. That's how I get a lot of my energy. But I also just learned to like be, like Resa was saying, in the silence. So spending time with myself, either going for walks or reading a book by myself. Honestly, sometimes just sitting in prayer and just like listening to my own thoughts is also huge for me too. So appreciate y'all sharing this, because I think we talked a lot about heavy things, hard things that have challenged us, you know, really, you know, push us each and every day and really test us. But I think it's really important that we ended on that self-care piece to talk about how we're taking care of ourselves and how we are, you know, still showing up, but making sure we're good too when we leave the spaces that we come into. So to end us today, I want to do a quick rapid fire. I'm just going to say a phrase and I want y'all to fill in the blank. So whatever first comes to mind. So Resa, I'm going to toss it to you first. Women are
powerful.
Love it. Sydnee? Sydnee, rapid fire.
Oh, she said rapid fire. Let's go. What's the word?
Phenomenal.
I'm saying unstoppable. So I think between the three of us, we covered a pretty good array of words there and just really show how we think about women. So I wanted to thank you all for tuning into another episode of the Maryland Made podcast. Please be sure to download, subscribe, and share episodes on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also watch episodes on YouTube if you want to see Resa's haircut, if you want to see Sydnee's t-shirt, and then you can never miss an episode on any of these platforms. To connect with us, make sure you're following Maryland Made on Instagram and Twitter at MDMadeTerps, and connect with us on LinkedIn as well. You can also find us on our personal social platforms. And remember, be who you are, do what you want. See ya.